What is going on, garden nerds? Today we have an awesome video. It might be a little controversial video, but once you understand, it's no more controversial. It's just something that you need to do. We are going to talk about something that affects all gardeners, anybody that grows anything in their yard. This has affected them. We are going to talk about weeds. Yes, that's right. We're going to talk about weeds, the word that most gardeners don't like to hear, and they think, I gotta kill them. How do I kill them? We're going to talk about why weeds are maybe not so bad, and we're going to talk more specifically about why you should stop using weed killer. I found this. We did some remodeling, actually lots of remodeling over the past year. We were cleaning out our garage, and I found this from like 2 or 3 years ago. I have not used any weed killer. It's been probably 2 years now. I'm a recovering weed killer user. We're going to talk about why now I can't wait to throw this away. I saved it just to make this video, but now I can't wait to throw it away. We're going to talk about why, if you have any at your house, you should throw it away too. Are you ready? Let's go. All right, guys. So once I understood all of this about weeds and weed killers, now I'm on a mission. I'm on a mission to get everybody to stop using weed killers. And I'm on a mission to save the soil, because weed killers are killing our soil. Getting rid of weeds is not hurting, or is not helping our soil either. So I want to talk about that. First, we've talked in other videos about succession, ecological succession, right? We've talked about how at the very beginning, when the dirt is just that, it's just dirt. It's not soil, it's just dirt. We talked about it's full of lots of bacteria, very little fungi, and it's full of these pioneer plants, such as weeds, right? Plants that will grow anywhere, stuff that we consider invasive. We talked about it in the last video, if you want to check it out. So that's how it starts, and then it gradually increases to where we're moving from not so much of a bacterial-dominated soil, but there's a lot more fungal biomass in that as well. And as we do that, as we move along that process, we go from the weeds, we go from the grasses and the brassicas, then to the shrubs, then to the mid-sized trees. Then once the soil is fungally dominated, now we move into those old growth forests, right? That's the whole process of succession, ecological succession. We're going from a very bacterial dominated soil to more fungal dominated soil. And as we do that, we can move along the spectrum of the types of trees and plants we can grow. It gets better and better as we get later into succession. Okay, so now let's talk a little bit about what weed killer is actually doing to your soil. Yes, we know that weed killer is going to kill the weeds. It's probably going to kill anything that you put it on, even if it's grass or anything else. It's going to kill these living plants, right? But what they don't talk about, and they do these tests and they do these studies and they said, oh no, it doesn't affect the bees, it doesn't affect the insects. What they don't look at and what they don't take into consideration is the soil life, the biology in the soil. What is it doing to that? That's what they don't understand. That's the most important thing. So what it is doing is, yes, it's killing the weed, but it is also killing all of the it's killing a lot of the microorganisms that are in your soil. Specifically, it's killing the fungi. Weed killers are going to kill a lot more fungi than they are bacteria. They will kill some bacteria, but most of the bacteria is going to be left. There's going to be no fungi left in the soil. It is completely killing all of the fungi in the soil. Now let's talk about why that's important. You just heard me talk about succession. And what did we say in succession in the beginning stages, when the only thing that will grow are like our invasive species and our weeds? The soil is heavily dominated by what? By bacteria. And if we want to move away from a soil that only wants weeds and, basically invasive species, what do we have to do? We have to add more fungal biomass to our soil, and then that allows us to move along the spectrum. But if it's just bacteria, guess what? Weeds thrive in bacteria-dominated soil. So what you are doing by killing the weed is you're also killing all the fungi, and you're leaving only bacteria, which is leaving a perfect environment for weeds to grow. So you're trying to get rid of your weeds, but actually you're just inviting more weeds into your yard, and you're making it more and more difficult to actually grow the things you want to grow. So it's counterproductive. Then you have to use more weed killer, and then more weed killer, and then more weed killer. It's a constant battle. You always wonder how, like, man, weeds can grow in like the crack of asphalt or whatever, right? They grow in all these crazy places where the soil is bad. Yeah, that's because they thrive where the soil is bad. And by using weed killer, you're creating bad soil. So stop creating a friendly environment for the weeds, because that's what you're doing when you use weed killer. It's a never-ending vicious cycle. Okay, so now we know, I get passionate about it, but now we know why you need to stop using weed killer. Don't throw it away. Just throw it away. It's gonna be okay. I promise you will be okay. As a recovering addict myself, it's been 2+ years, and I'm fine. I feel great. Throw it away. Now that we're not gonna use any more weed killer, you may say, well, how do I get rid of the weeds, right? I don't want weeds in my garden. I get that, but I'm becoming more and more aware of the fact that weeds actually help us in the garden. And by pulling them and stressing about them, using weed killer, whatever, we're fighting against nature instead of accepting it and what it's trying to do. So we'll go back to succession. In the early stages, when the soil is horrible and the only thing that will grow is weeds, guess what the weeds are doing? The weeds are, one, doing photosynthesis. They're putting nutrients into the soil that the microbiology wants, and it's creating more and more microbiology in the soil, right? So that's one, it's starting to create life. It's also shading the soil, which is good. No soil should be left barren, right? So it's shading the soil. It's also dropping organic matter onto the soil, which is feeding more of those microorganisms, which is inviting more and more. And then additionally, it is also, like I mentioned, it's protecting the earth. You'll notice that a lot of weeds and other invasive type species are just like real thorny. They even have thorns. Sometimes their seeds go and they're thorny, right? But what that's actually doing is it's protecting the earth. It's protecting the soil from predators, from cattle, from grazers who are going to go and compact and stomp the ground to eat those things so that there's no organic material there to feed the earth, right? So it's actually like nature's Band-Aid. It is covering up the horrible soil, and it is starting to, with time, starting to heal the soil, right? So weeds aren't necessarily bad. They're simply the pioneers that are preparing the way for more desirable species to grow. How do we put that into practice, right? So I have grass, right? A lot of people think you shouldn't have grass. I think you should, or you can, or it's not a big deal for multiple reasons that I've gone into in other videos. But anyways, I have grass. I don't use weed killer. I don't use herbicides. I don't use anything to that nature. Guess what shows up all the time in grass? Weeds. I'm not messing with the weeds. I'm leaving them. So as I mentioned, we did a lot of construction in my house, which led out here in the backyard. There was a lot of compaction in the grass. When summer started, it was just dirt. It was just nasty dirt, right? What grew there first? The grass didn't come back first. Weeds came back first. I wanted to go and pull them, but I said, no, I'm a recovering addict. I had to stop myself. I wanted to go and pull them, and I keep looking over here because that's right where it was. Instead of pulling them or using weed killer, I let them be. I let them start to rejuvenate and to heal the soil. And now slowly with time, the weeds are going away, the grass is coming in stronger, and the grass is choking out the weeds and shading out the weeds, and the weeds are dying. If we're anywhere in our yard and we're trying to start rejuvenating the soil, we're adding organic material, things to that nature. If we're doing any of that, we don't want to get rid of the weeds, because the weeds are sitting there and again, they're improving the soil. So unless it's like something where you just don't want to see the weeds, it's in your front yard, you want to present a nice clean yard, whatever. If it's not hurting you or it's not an eyesore, let them be. They're there for a reason. That is nature trying to tell you this is bad soil. That's why only weeds are growing. And then from there, we just need to start adding more organic material, more life, more plants, more ground cover, so that we can start to fix that soil. But weeds aren't always necessarily bad. Don't have to go and pull them right away. You for sure don't have to spray them with weed killer, but you for sure don't have to go and pull them right away. All right, so you're probably saying at this point, hey, this sounds great. Michael, I want to be like you. I'm an addict. I want to be done. I want to throw away my weed killer. I don't want to pick my weeds. But man, I just can't handle the fact that there are weeds in my yard. Like, I can't let that happen. I get it. And I'm becoming more and more lenient. In the beginning, when I wasn't spraying them, I was picking them all the time. So I get it. But I have 6 tips for you, what you can do to help repress weeds or to help get rid of the weeds naturally in your yard. 6 tips. We're going to go into them right now. Are you ready? All right, tip number 1 is use compost and mulch, right? The more compost we add on that's fungally dominated, or a 1-to-1 ratio of bacteria to fungi, will help kill some of those weeds. We know compost, if it's done correctly, is not going to have any weed seeds in it. And then on top of that, we're going to be throwing down all of our mulch. Guess what? If we stack mulch up 6 inches, 1 foot, 2 feet high in certain areas, what's that going to stop? It's going to stop the weeds from growing. It will completely smother out and stop the weeds from growing. So wherever you can, where you don't have a ground cover going or a tree or a shrub, throw down lots of mulch, and that is going to drown out those weeds. That's tip number 1. Tip number 2, and this is if you absolutely have to get rid of weeds, like in those few scenarios that we talked about. What I love to do to get rid of weeds in that scenario is to use fire, right? Because what fire does, I have a torch, I got it from Home Depot. It just is a propane torch. I made a video about it. But what fire does is we're not ripping up the weeds or the roots of the weeds. We're keeping them in the ground. We're keeping the ground covered, right? So we get them with the fire, and if there's any seed left on there, it kills the seeds, and then it just sits there as organic matter, and it can still break down and go into the ground. So if you absolutely have to get rid of them, burn them rather than picking them, and for sure rather than using weed killer. Tip number 3 is use cover crops. As I mentioned with my grass, as it grew and got thicker and got healthier, it smothered out the weeds. Any type of cover crop, guys, that you can think of. Again, it does the same thing as mulch. As it grows, and as the grass grows, you know, as I was talking about in my example, as those things grow, they smother out the weeds. They don't allow them to get sunlight. They take over because they're the healthier, more dominant species, and it's going to overtake the unhealthy weeds. And as those things start to improve the soil, and we move down that path of succession, right, weeds aren't going to dominate. They're not going to thrive in a soil that has a little bit more fungi in it. Remember, they like to dominate in the bacterial-dominated soil. So ground cover is a great way to get rid of weeds naturally. Number 4 is great, and this is what you should do for a number of different reasons, but diversity in all of your planting. The more diverse you get in your planting, the more you're going to suppress the weeds. Use lots of different kinds of ground cover. I have grass, yes, but I have other types of ground cover. Plant lots of different shrubs and flowers and things to that nature. All of those things, the more diverse, the more you're going to naturally suppress the weeds. Number 5 is correct watering. That's a huge thing, especially when you're here in the desert Southwest. As you can tell, it's like 6 o'clock at night, I think. No, 7 o'clock at night. It's like 110 degrees, sweating. Sweat is starting to go into my eyes. But correct watering techniques. Again, if we're watering correctly, see, that's one thing about weeds. Sometimes their roots can go deep, but they're not going to go long-term as deep as a healthy tree in good soil, right? Healthy tree is going to send taproot down super far. That's where we want to get the water down to support the good things, the good species that we want, so that we're creating, again, unfavorable conditions to where weeds will want to grow. We want to create unfavorable conditions for weeds and create favorable conditions for the more, popular species or desirable plant species that we want to grow. So water correctly. If you're wondering how do I water correctly, search the channel. I have lots of videos on watering and watering correctly, especially here in the desert Southwest. Then the last tip, the 6th tip for trying to naturally get rid of weeds is if you're like, all right, now I agree with you, Michael, I'm going to let the weeds grow. I'm not going to get rid of them. One tip of advice, yes, weeds are growing there now. No, I'm not going to pull them, but also no, I don't want them to spread into other areas. So if you are going to allow the weeds to stay, which I do, I pick them before they go to seed. I don't pull the whole thing, but if I see, the stem and I can tell, yep, that's going to go to seed, I'll just cut that part off and get rid of it so that the seeds don't spread. Because those seeds can sit there for years and years and years and years, and then once something happens in the soil and conditions are favorable again, for the weeds, guess what's going to happen? Those seeds that have sat there for 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years, they're going to sprout. So yes, weeds are good for all the things we talked about, but we don't want them to continue to spread. So get rid of the seeds before they go to seed. So that's it, guys. That's why weeds aren't that big of a deal. We don't need to freak out about weeds. They're actually there for a reason. Nature's trying to tell us something. And for sure, we don't need to use weed killer. Stop using weed killer for all the reasons mentioned. I could talk for hours and repeat myself, but weed killer is not good for anything. It's not good for anyone. If you're a recovering weed killer like me, you can do it. Cold turkey. I'm gonna go throw this away right now, and I never want this type of toxic stuff in my yard ever again. Thanks for watching, guys. Hope you enjoyed the video. If you have any questions, comments, whatever, post them below. I love hearing from everybody. We'll see you in the next video.